The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Kensington Palace as Detective Chief Inspector Marcus Thompson adjusted his earpiece and scanned the perimeter one final time. At 42 years old, Marcus had dedicated nearly 2 decades of his life to protecting the royal family. But today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that made his trained instincts hum with alertness. Princess Catherine was scheduled to attend a charity fundraiser at the nearby community center, a routine engagement that had been planned for months. The event was meant to support local families affected by recent flooding, and Catherine had insisted on maintaining her commitment despite the security team's growing concerns about recent intelligence reports. Marcus had reviewed the threat assessment 3 times that morning. Over the past few weeks, MI5 had been tracking increased chatter from various extremist groups, and while none of the threats were deemed credible enough to cancel public engagements, they were serious enough to warrant heightened security protocols. The princess, however, remained determined to fulfill her duties, believing that the people needed to see the royal family standing with them during difficult times. As the head of Catherine's personal protection team, Marcus carried the weight of responsibility heavily on his shoulders. He had hand-picked every member of his unit, men and women who shared his unwavering commitment to service and sacrifice. Sarah Mitchell, his second-in-command, had been with the team for 8 years and possessed an almost supernatural ability to read crowds and identify potential threats. James Rodriguez brought technical expertise that was unmatched in the field, while Emma Clark's background in psychology made her invaluable when assessing individual behavioral patterns. The team had spent the previous evening conducting a thorough security sweep of the community center. Every entrance and exit had been mapped, every potential hiding spot identified, and every attendee's background checked against various databases. Local police had been briefed and positioned strategically throughout the area, creating multiple layers of protection around the venue. Marcus remembered his first day on Royal Protection Detail nearly 20 years ago. He had been a young constable, fresh-faced and eager, assigned to crowd control during a minor royal visit. That day, he had witnessed the delicate balance between maintaining security and allowing the royals to connect meaningfully with the public. It was an art form that required constant vigilance, split-second decision-making, and an almost psychic ability to anticipate problems before they materialized. The call came through his earpiece at precisely 9:30 in the morning. Princess Catherine was ready to depart from Kensington Palace. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that marked the beginning of every protection operation. He had learned over the years that complacency was the enemy of effective security, and no matter how routine an engagement might seem, each one carried its own unique risks and challenges. As the royal convoy prepared to leave the palace grounds, Marcus reviewed the route one final time with his team. They would take the most direct path to the community center, but 3 alternative routes had been planned and rehearsed in case circumstances required a sudden change of direction. Traffic had been carefully managed along the primary route, and unmarked security vehicles would maintain positions ahead of and behind the royal car throughout the journey. Princess Catherine emerged from the palace looking radiant in a navy blue coat dress that had been chosen specifically for its respectful tone given the serious nature of the charity event. Her warm smile and genuine enthusiasm for the day's engagement were evident, but Marcus could see the slight tension in her eyes that suggested she too was aware of the heightened security concerns. The journey to the community center proceeded without incident, but Marcus remained hyper-vigilant, his eyes constantly scanning the crowds that had gathered along the route despite the early hour. People held small British flags and homemade signs expressing support for the flood victims, their faces filled with the kind of genuine affection and respect that made royal protection work both challenging and deeply meaningful. Upon arrival at the community center, Marcus conducted one final sweep of the immediate area while his team took their positions. The building was a modest structure that had served the local community for over 50 years, its red brick facade showing signs of age but radiating a warmth that spoke to its role as a gathering place for neighborhood events and celebrations. Local dignitaries and charity organizers waited inside to greet the princess, their excitement palpable as they prepared for what many considered the most significant royal visit their small community had ever hosted. Marcus had briefed each of them personally the day before, explaining the importance of following security protocols while ensuring that the event maintained its intended spirit of community support and solidarity. The first hour of the engagement unfolded exactly as planned. Princess Catherine moved gracefully through the crowd, stopping to speak with flood victims and their families, listening intently to their stories of loss and recovery, and offering words of encouragement that seemed to lift spirits and strengthen resolve. Her natural ability to connect with people from all walks of life was on full display, and Marcus found himself once again impressed by her dedication and genuine compassion. Children from the local primary school had prepared a special presentation about environmental conservation and flood prevention, their young voices filling the community center with hope and determination. Catherine listened with obvious delight, asking thoughtful questions and praising their creativity and insight. Moments like these reminded Marcus why he had chosen this profession, why protecting these individuals who dedicated their lives to public service felt like more than just a job. As the morning progressed, Marcus noticed subtle changes in the crowd dynamics that triggered his professional alarm system. A man near the back of the room seemed agitated, checking his phone repeatedly and scanning the exits with an intensity that didn't match the relaxed atmosphere of the event. Another individual had positioned himself unusually close to one of the side entrances, and his behavior suggested he was more interested in monitoring the security team's movements than in listening to the presentations. Sarah Mitchell caught Marcus's eye from across the room and nodded almost imperceptibly, indicating that she too had noticed these anomalies. Years of working together had created an almost telepathic communication system between team members, allowing them to share observations and coordinate responses without alerting potential threats to their awareness. The threat assessment protocols that Marcus had developed over his career emphasized the importance of distinguishing between genuine security concerns and the natural nervousness that many people experienced in the presence of royalty. However, his instincts, honed by countless hours of training and real-world experience, were telling him that something was not quite right about this particular gathering. James Rodriguez, positioned near the main entrance, received a priority message through his secure communication device. The content of that message would later prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed, but in that moment, it was simply another piece of intelligence that needed to be processed and evaluated against the broader security picture. Princess Catherine was in the middle of cutting the ribbon for a new flood relief initiative when Marcus received the alert that would change everything. Through his earpiece, he heard James's voice, calm but urgent, reporting that MI5 had intercepted communications suggesting that a coordinated action was imminent, potentially targeting this very event. The next few seconds felt like hours, as Marcus's mind processed the implications of this intelligence. His team was spread throughout the venue, the princess was surrounded by civilians, and any sudden movement could create panic that might actually facilitate whatever threat was developing. 20 years of training and experience had prepared him for exactly this moment, but the reality of it still sent a surge of adrenaline through his system. Without breaking his professional composure, Marcus began implementing the emergency protocols that his team had rehearsed countless times. A series of subtle hand signals alerted each team member to the elevated threat level while maintaining the appearance of normal security operations. The goal was to extract Princess Catherine from the venue safely and quickly without causing alarm among the attendees or compromising their own tactical advantages. Emma Clark, positioned near the presentation area, began a casual conversation with one of the event organizers about adjusting the schedule, creating a natural reason for the princess to move toward the prepared extraction route. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell started a discreet sweep of the individuals Marcus had flagged earlier, her trained eye assessing their potential threat level and looking for any signs of weapons or suspicious devices. The community center suddenly felt much smaller and more confined than it had just minutes earlier. Every face in the crowd became a potential threat, every movement a possible prelude to violence. Marcus had experienced this shift in perspective many times throughout his career, the way a familiar environment could transform instantly from a place of celebration into a potential battlefield. Princess Catherine, unaware of the developing situation, continued to interact warmly with the attendees, her natural grace and charm unchanged by the invisible tensions building around her. This was both a blessing and a challenge for Marcus and his team. Her genuine engagement with the public was exactly what made these events meaningful, but it also made rapid extraction more complex and potentially conspicuous. The man near the back of the room suddenly stood up and began walking toward the front, his movement deliberate and focused in a way that immediately caught Marcus's attention. At the same time, the individual near the side entrance appeared to be reaching into his jacket, his body language shifting from passive observation to active preparation. Marcus felt time slow down as his training took over completely. Every detail of the room became hyper-visible. The position of each team member, the location of every exit, the proximity of innocent civilians to potential lines of fire, the exact distance between himself and Princess Catherine. This was the moment that separated good protection officers from exceptional ones. The ability to process multiple threats simultaneously, while maintaining the calm focus necessary for effective decision-making. The secure communication channel crackled with urgent updates as intelligence services provided real-time information about the developing threat. What had begun as routine monitoring of extremist communications had evolved into an active situation requiring immediate response. The individuals Marcus had identified were now confirmed to be part of a coordinated effort, though the exact nature and timing of their planned action remained unclear. Sarah Mitchell moved smoothly through the crowd, her approach to the suspicious individuals appearing casual to untrained observers, but clearly tactical to anyone with security experience. Her hand rested naturally near her concealed weapon, ready to respond instantly if the situation escalated beyond the point where subtle intervention could be effective. Emma Clark had successfully guided Princess Catherine toward the predetermined extraction point under the guise of moving to better lighting for photographs with the charity organizers. The princess remained gracious and cooperative, though Marcus could see that she was beginning to sense something unusual about her security team's behavior. The tension in the room was becoming almost palpable, at least to those trained to recognize it. Marcus knew that they were approaching a critical decision point: continue with subtle extraction and risk being too slow if threats materialized immediately, or move to rapid evacuation protocols that would certainly alarm civilians but guarantee faster removal of the primary protectee from danger. James Rodriguez reported through the communication network that additional security resources were en route, but still several minutes away. Local police units were repositioning to provide support, but for now, Marcus and his team were operating with the resources immediately available to them. This was exactly the kind of scenario that had driven him to insist on the highest possible training standards for every member of his unit. The sound of Princess Catherine's laughter as she responded to a child's question about royal duties seemed to echo strangely in Marcus's heightened state of awareness. The contrast between her genuine joy in the moment and the potential danger surrounding her created a surreal atmosphere that required him to maintain focus on multiple realities simultaneously. As the man from the back of the room continued his approach toward the front, Marcus made the decision that would define everything that followed. Professional instinct, years of experience, and a deep understanding of threat dynamics all aligned in that moment to tell him that waiting any longer would be a mistake that could cost lives. The moment Marcus Thompson made his decision, everything changed. With a subtle but urgent gesture to his team, he activated the emergency extraction protocol they had practiced countless times but hoped never to use. Sarah Mitchell immediately moved to intercept the approaching suspect while Emma Clark smoothly guided Princess Catherine toward the nearest secure exit, maintaining the appearance of a routine schedule adjustment. The man walking from the back of the room suddenly accelerated his pace, his hand moving inside his jacket in a motion that triggered every alarm in Marcus's trained consciousness. Without hesitation, Marcus positioned himself directly between the suspect and Princess Catherine, his body becoming a human shield as he simultaneously reached for his concealed weapon and spoke rapidly into his communication device. "Crown is moving, Crown is moving." Marcus transmitted using the code name for Princess Catherine. Multiple threats identified, initiating immediate extraction. The community center, which moments before had been filled with the warm sounds of community celebration, suddenly became a battlefield of competing realities. Most attendees remained unaware of the developing crisis, continuing their conversations and activities, while a life-or-death drama unfolded around them with surgical precision. Sarah Mitchell's approach to the first suspect was a masterpiece of tactical intervention. Years of training had taught her to move with purpose while maintaining an appearance of casual movement that wouldn't alarm innocent bystanders. As she closed the distance between herself and the man who had been monitoring the exits, she could see his increasing agitation and the telltale signs of someone preparing for violent action. The suspect, near the side entrance, suddenly produced what appeared to be a communication device, speaking rapidly in hushed tones while his eyes swept the room with predatory focus. Emma Clark, while maintaining her protective position near Princess Catherine, observed this development and immediately relayed the information to Marcus through their secure channel. Princess Catherine, despite her training in emergency protocols, seemed momentarily confused by the sudden change in her security team's behavior. The warm, relaxed atmosphere of the charity event had shifted imperceptibly but dramatically, and her natural instincts were telling her that something significant was happening, even though the specific nature of the threat remained unclear.
"Your Royal Highness," Emma Clark said softly but firmly, "we need to adjust your position for better photography angles." The code phrase, established long ago, signaled to Catherine that security concerns required her immediate cooperation without alarming nearby civilians.
Marcus watched the advancing suspect with the intense focus of a predator assessing a threat. Every detail registered in his consciousness: the man's accelerating pace, the bulge under his jacket that suggested a concealed weapon, the way his eyes locked onto Princess Catherine's position with unmistakable intent. 20 years of protection experience had taught Marcus to trust his instincts completely in moments like these. The secure communication channel erupted with urgent updates as intelligence services provided real-time information about the coordinated nature of the threat. What had begun as monitoring routine extremist communications had evolved into an active plot targeting this specific event, with multiple individuals positioned strategically throughout the venue. James Rodriguez, maintaining his position near the main entrance, reported visual confirmation of additional suspicious individuals outside the building. Unmarked vehicles had positioned themselves along potential escape routes, and communication intercepts suggested that the attack was designed to coincide with Princess Catherine's departure from the venue. The man from the back of the room was now less than 20 feet away, his movement becoming increasingly aggressive and focused. Marcus could see the determination in his eyes, the kind of fanatical focus that marked someone who had crossed the psychological barrier between planning violence and executing it. This was no longer a potential threat. It was an active one requiring immediate response. Sarah Mitchell reached the suspect near the side entrance just as he began to withdraw what appeared to be a weapon from his jacket. Her training took over completely as she executed a precise takedown that neutralized the threat, while minimizing the risk to nearby civilians. The movement was so smooth and professional that most attendees didn't even notice the brief struggle. Target 1 secured. Sarah's voice came through the communication system with the calm professionalism that marked elite protection officers. Weapon recovered, suspect in custody. But the primary threat was still advancing toward Princess Catherine, and Marcus knew that the window for subtle intervention had closed. The man's hand was now clearly gripping something inside his jacket, and his body language indicated that he was seconds away from producing whatever weapon he carried. Emma Clark had successfully moved Princess Catherine to within 10 feet of the secured exit, but the advancing threat was closing the distance faster than they could safely retreat. Marcus made a split-second decision that would define his entire career. He stepped directly into the suspect's path, placing himself between the threat and the person he had sworn to protect. "Armed police!" Marcus shouted, finally abandoning any pretense of subtlety as he drew his weapon and trained it on the advancing suspect. "Stop where you are and show me your hands." The community center erupted in confusion as civilians suddenly realized that something serious was happening. Children began crying, adults shouted questions and demands for information, and the organized charity event dissolved into barely controlled chaos. But Marcus's focus remained laser-sharp on the immediate threat. The suspect's response was exactly what Marcus had feared. Instead of stopping and complying with commands, the man accelerated his advance while simultaneously producing a pistol from inside his jacket. The weapon appeared with practiced efficiency, suggesting military or professional training that made him significantly more dangerous than a typical lone wolf attacker. Time seemed to slow as Marcus processed the tactical situation. The suspect was now armed, and clearly intent on violence. Princess Catherine was behind him but not yet clear of the danger zone, and dozens of innocent civilians were caught in what could become a crossfire situation. Every decision carried potentially lethal consequences for multiple people. "Gun! Gun! Gun!" Marcus transmitted over the secure channel as he maintained his weapon's sight picture on the advancing threat. The code phrase would alert every member of his team and all supporting units that the situation had escalated to active shooter status. Emma Clark immediately implemented the final phase of emergency extraction, physically shielding Princess Catherine while moving her rapidly toward the exit. Years of training had prepared both women for exactly this scenario, and their response was executed with the precision of a choreographed dance despite the chaos surrounding them. The suspect raised his weapon toward Marcus, but his primary target was clearly Princess Catherine. Marcus could see the calculation in the man's eyes. Eliminate the protection officer first, then complete the primary mission. It was a logical, tactical approach that Marcus had studied and prepared for throughout his career. Without hesitation, Marcus fired 2 precise shots, center mass, the sound of gunfire echoing thunderously through the community center, and sending civilians diving for cover in every direction. His training had emphasized the importance of stopping threats immediately and completely, without hesitation or doubt that could cost innocent lives. The suspect staggered but didn't fall, his body armor apparently absorbing the impact of Marcus's rounds. This development transformed the tactical situation dramatically. What should have been a terminated threat was now a wounded but still dangerous adversary with nothing left to lose. James Rodriguez burst through the main entrance with backup officers, just as the suspect attempted to shift his aim toward Princess Catherine's retreating figure. The timing was critical. Seconds later might have meant the difference between successful protection and catastrophic failure. Marcus fired again, this time aiming for the suspect's head, as the man attempted to track Princess Catherine despite his wounds. The shot was perfect, ending the immediate threat but creating new challenges as other potential attackers might now be accelerating their own timelines in response to the gunfire. Sarah Mitchell, having secured her suspect, immediately moved to assist with crowd control while scanning for additional threats. The intelligence reports had indicated a coordinated effort, and the neutralization of 2 attackers didn't guarantee that others weren't still positioned to continue the operation. Princess Catherine and Emma Clark reached the secured exit just as additional armed officers flooded into the community center from multiple entrances. The emergency response protocols that had been planned and rehearsed were now being executed under real-world conditions, with lives hanging in the balance. The aftermath of the shooting was almost as challenging as the incident itself. Civilians needed medical attention for injuries sustained during the panic, witnesses required debriefing, and the crime scene had to be secured while ensuring that no additional threats remained hidden among the confused and frightened attendees. Marcus stood over the fallen suspect, his weapon still trained on the motionless figure while his mind processed the rapid sequence of events that had just unfolded. 20 years of training and experience had culminated in these few minutes of violence, and the weight of what had just happened was beginning to settle on his shoulders. Emergency medical personnel rushed to assist civilians who had been injured during the evacuation, while specialized units began the complex process of clearing the building and ensuring that no additional threats remained. The community center that had been filled with hope and charity just minutes before was now a crime scene requiring extensive investigation and analysis. Princess Catherine, safely secured in the armored vehicle that would transport her back to Kensington Palace, asked about the welfare of Marcus and his team. Her concern for the people who had just risked their lives to protect her was characteristic of her personality and the values she brought to her public role. The secure communication channels buzzed with updates as intelligence services worked to determine whether the immediate threat had been completely neutralized or if additional attacks might be planned for other locations. The coordinated nature of the assault suggested a level of organization that required comprehensive response across multiple potential targets. Marcus remained at the scene to coordinate with investigating officers and provide initial statements about the incident. His actions would be subject to extensive review and analysis, a standard procedure that ensured accountability and continuous improvement in protection protocols. The media had already begun gathering outside the community center, drawn by reports of gunfire and emergency response vehicles. Managing public information while protecting operational security would become another complex challenge, requiring careful coordination between multiple agencies and departments. As the immediate crisis passed and normal investigative procedures took over, Marcus found himself reflecting on the split-second decisions that had defined the incident. Every choice had carried enormous consequences, and the successful outcome was the result of years of preparation, training, and teamwork that had functioned flawlessly under extreme pressure. The armored Mercedes carrying Princess Catherine sped through the London streets with Marcus Thompson seated in the front passenger seat, his eyes constantly scanning the route ahead while maintaining communication with the command center at Kensington Palace. Despite the successful neutralization of the immediate threat, intelligence reports suggested that the attack at the community center might have been only the beginning of a larger, more coordinated operation. Behind them, the community center remained locked down as forensic teams worked to process the crime scene, and investigators began the complex task of unraveling the network that had orchestrated the assault. The two suspects in custody were providing valuable intelligence, but their interrogation was revealing the existence of additional cells and backup plans that sent chills through the entire royal protection apparatus. Princess Catherine sat silently in the back seat, her earlier composure now tinged with the reality of what had just transpired. For the first time in her years of public service, she had witnessed firsthand the violence that her security team worked tirelessly to prevent. The sound of gunfire in the community center would remain with her for years to come, a stark reminder of the dangers that accompanied her public role. Emma Clark maintained her position beside the princess, monitoring secure communications while watching for any signs of pursuit or ambush along their route. The intelligence picture was evolving rapidly, with new threats being identified and assessed in real time as various agencies worked to map the full extent of the conspiracy. The route back to Kensington Palace had been changed twice during the journey, as new intelligence indicated potential ambush points along the original path. Marcus coordinated these adjustments with the precision of a military operation, understanding that their greatest vulnerability lay in the period between the initial attack and reaching the secure perimeter of the royal residence. James Rodriguez, following in a support vehicle with additional protection officers, reported unusual vehicle movements at several points along their modified route. What appeared to be surveillance teams were repositioning in response to the convoy's movements, suggesting a level of coordination and real-time communication that indicated a sophisticated operation. The secure communication channel crackled with updates from MI5 and Scotland Yard as the investigation into the attack expanded. Cell phone intercepts had revealed communications between the arrested suspects and unknown individuals, indicating that the operation was far from over and that additional attempts might be imminent. Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. As the scope of the threat became clear, this wasn't simply a random attack by isolated extremists. It was a carefully planned operation, with multiple backup plans and contingencies. The successful defense at the community center might have prevented one tragedy, but it could also have triggered escalation from other elements of the conspiracy. As they approached Kensington Palace, additional security measures became visible. Armed officers had taken positions at every possible vantage point, while specialized units conducted final sweeps of the palace grounds to ensure no threats had infiltrated the secure perimeter during the chaos of the morning's events. Princess Catherine finally broke her silence as the palace gates came into view. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I want you to know how grateful I am for what you and your team did today. Those people at the community center, they could have been killed because of me." Marcus turned to face her, seeing in her eyes the kind of burden that came with understanding the true cost of public service. "Your Royal Highness," he replied, "those people were there because you give them hope. What happened today was about hatred trying to destroy something beautiful, and we didn't let that happen." The convoy passed through the palace gates and into the secure courtyard, where additional protection teams waited to ensure a safe transition from the vehicles to the interior of the residence. Even here, surrounded by multiple layers of security, Marcus remained vigilant for threats that might have found ways to penetrate their defenses. Prince William was waiting in the private quarters, his face showing the strain of the past several hours. He had been monitoring the situation from the palace, receiving regular updates but powerless to do anything except trust in the professionalism and dedication of the protection teams. The helplessness of watching someone you love face danger was written clearly in his expression. The reunion between husband and wife was deeply emotional, but it was also brief. Intelligence reports continued to flow in, and it was becoming clear that the threat was far from over. Additional plots were being uncovered, and the investigation was revealing connections to international terrorist networks that had been monitoring royal family activities for months. Marcus briefed Prince William on the morning's events, while Emma Clark coordinated with palace security to implement enhanced protection protocols. The attack had demonstrated that existing security measures, while effective, needed to be augmented to address the evolving nature of the threats they faced. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the palace with detailed intelligence gathered from the interrogation of the captured suspects. The information was deeply troubling. The attack at the community center had been designed as the opening phase of a week-long campaign targeting multiple members of the royal family. The investigation revealed that the terrorist network had been conducting surveillance of royal activities for nearly 6 months, mapping security procedures and identifying potential vulnerabilities in protection protocols. Their planning was sophisticated, involving detailed analysis of response times, evacuation routes, and communication procedures. Marcus found himself questioning whether there might be additional threats already positioned within the palace itself. The level of inside knowledge demonstrated by the attackers suggested possible infiltration of support staff or service personnel who had access to sensitive information about royal schedules and security arrangements. Emergency meeting was convened in the palace's secure conference room, bringing together representatives from MI5, Scotland Yard, and the Royal Protection Command. The scope of the threat required coordination between multiple agencies, each bringing specialized capabilities to address different aspects of the conspiracy. The arrested suspects had provided information about planned attacks targeting Prince William during his upcoming visit to Wales, as well as threats against other family members who were scheduled to attend various public engagements throughout the week. The entire royal calendar would need to be reviewed and potentially modified to address these specific threats. Marcus studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The network they were dealing with had international connections and access to military-grade weapons and equipment. The body armor worn by the suspect at the community center was of a type typically available only to special forces units, indicating either theft from military sources or direct support from hostile foreign powers. Princess Catherine insisted on continuing her scheduled engagements despite the obvious risks. Her argument was compelling. Canceling public appearances would hand the terrorists a victory and deprive the people who depended on royal support of the encouragement and assistance they needed. The decision would ultimately rest with security professionals, but her preferences would carry significant weight. The palace communications team was working to manage public information about the morning's events without revealing details that might compromise ongoing security operations or provide useful intelligence to remaining members of the terrorist network. Balancing transparency with operational security was a delicate task requiring careful coordination. James Rodriguez reported from the community center that forensic analysis had revealed additional evidence of the conspiracy's scope. Hidden cameras had been discovered in nearby buildings, positioned to monitor royal arrival and departure procedures. The surveillance operation had been far more extensive than initially realized. Emma Clark briefed Marcus on enhanced security protocols being implemented throughout all royal residences. Background checks were being expanded for all personnel with access to family members, and new screening procedures were being developed to address the specific vulnerabilities that had been identified during the investigation. The psychological impact of the morning's violence was beginning to affect everyone involved. Marcus had seen combat during his military service before joining royal protection, but the specific challenge of defending against assassination attempts while surrounded by innocent civilians created unique stresses that required careful management. Princess Catherine asked to speak privately with Marcus about the events at the community center. Her questions revealed a deep understanding of the risks her public role created for others, and her concern for the civilians who had been endangered because of their proximity to her was genuine and profound. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, covering everything from the specific tactical decisions made during the attack to the broader implications for future public engagements. Marcus found himself impressed once again by Catherine's intelligence and her commitment to understanding the realities of the security challenges her position created. As evening approached, intelligence reports indicated that the terrorist network might be preparing to accelerate their timeline in response to the failure of the community center attack. Additional resources were being deployed to protect all potential targets, but the scope of the threat was stretching available capabilities to their limits. The investigation had revealed communication between the arrested suspects and individuals in several other countries, suggesting that the conspiracy extended far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. International cooperation would be essential to prevent additional attacks and to dismantle the entire network. Marcus received word that his team's actions at the community center were being reviewed for commendations, but his focus remained entirely on the ongoing threats. Until every member of the conspiracy was identified and neutralized, his job was far from finished. The Palace Security Command Center had been transformed into a war room, with intelligence analysts working around the clock to piece together the full scope of the terrorist network. Computer screens displayed real-time threat assessments, communication intercepts, and tactical deployment maps as the various agencies coordinated their response. Prince William thanked Marcus personally for his actions in protecting Catherine, but both men understood that the gratitude would have to be brief. The investigation was revealing new threats faster than existing ones could be neutralized, and the coming days would test every aspect of their security capabilities. As night fell over Kensington Palace, Marcus walked the perimeter one final time, checking on the positions of the additional guards who had been deployed to address the heightened threat level. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers, but tonight, Princess Catherine was safe, and that knowledge allowed him a few hours of rest before the next phase of the operation began. The war room at Scotland Yard buzzed with activity as Marcus Thompson studied the complex web of connections that investigators had uncovered during the past 18 hours. What had begun as an isolated attack at a community center was now revealed to be part of an international conspiracy, with tentacles reaching into multiple countries and involving dozens of operatives. Detective Chief Inspector Rachel Hayes, leading the Joint Terrorism Task Force, briefed Marcus on the latest developments. The two suspects captured at the community center had finally begun cooperating after extensive interrogation, and their information was painting a picture of a plot far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had initially imagined. The terrorist network had been planning what they called Operation Crownfall, a coordinated series of attacks designed to eliminate multiple members of the royal family simultaneously while maximizing public trauma and political disruption. The attack on Princess Catherine had been merely the opening move in a campaign that was scheduled to culminate with a devastating assault on Buckingham Palace during the upcoming state dinner. Marcus felt his blood run cold as he reviewed the operational plans that had been recovered from encrypted devices seized during raids conducted throughout the night. The level of detail was extraordinary. Floor plans of royal residences, detailed security assessments, personal schedules going back months, and even psychological profiles of individual protection officers and their likely responses to various scenarios. Sarah Mitchell joined the briefing, having spent the past day coordinating with international intelligence services to track down the network's connections across Europe and beyond. What they had discovered was deeply troubling. The conspiracy involved not only domestic extremists, but also foreign agents working to destabilize the British government and undermine public confidence in institutions. The attack at the community center had been specifically designed to test response capabilities and gather intelligence about protection procedures. The body armor worn by the suspects, the sophisticated communication equipment they carried, and their tactical training all indicated support from a well-funded and professionally organized operation. Emma Clark arrived with an update on Princess Catherine's current status. Despite the ongoing threats, the princess had insisted on reviewing her upcoming schedule and was arguing forcefully against canceling any public engagements. Her position was that giving in to terrorist demands would set a dangerous precedent and deprive the public of the support and encouragement they needed during difficult times. The intelligence picture continued to evolve as more evidence was processed, and additional suspects were identified. Cell phone records revealed communication patterns that suggested coordinated movement of operatives throughout London and other major cities. Surveillance camera footage was being analyzed to track these movements and identify additional members of the network. James Rodriguez reported from the technical analysis team that had been examining the equipment recovered from the arrested suspects. The communication devices they carried were military-grade and included encryption capabilities that suggested access to advanced technology typically available only to state-sponsored operations. Marcus studied maps showing the locations where suspected network members had been observed over the past several days. The pattern revealed a sophisticated surveillance operation that had been monitoring not only royal family members, but also their protection teams, mapping response procedures, and identifying potential vulnerabilities in security protocols. The investigation had uncovered evidence of insider assistance within various government agencies. Someone with access to classified security information had been providing regular updates to the terrorist network, enabling them to adjust their plans based on changes in protection procedures and threat assessments. Detective Hayes briefed the team on raids that had been conducted at dawn, targeting suspected safe houses and support facilities used by the network. The operations had yielded additional arrests and significant intelligence, but they had also revealed the existence of cells that remained unidentified and potentially still operational. The psychological warfare aspect of the conspiracy was becoming clear as analysts reviewed propaganda materials and communication strategies employed by the network. Their goal was not simply to eliminate royal family members, but to create lasting trauma that would undermine public confidence in the ability of security services to protect national institutions. Marcus received an urgent summons to Kensington Palace for a private meeting with Prince William and Princess Catherine. The intelligence briefing they were about to receive would affect fundamental decisions about their future public roles and the level of risk they were willing to accept in fulfilling their duties. The drive through London to the palace provided Marcus with an opportunity to observe the increased security presence that was now visible throughout the city. Armed police patrols had been augmented, and specialized units were positioned at strategic locations to respond rapidly to any new threats that might emerge. Princess Catherine was waiting in the palace library, her composed exterior masking what Marcus recognized as the strain of living under constant threat assessment. The events of the previous day had fundamentally changed her understanding of the dangers inherent in her public role, and the decisions she would make in the coming hours would affect not only her own security, but the future of royal family public engagement. Prince William joined the meeting, bringing with him intelligence reports that had been classified at the highest levels. The information they contained would shock even experienced security professionals and would require careful consideration of options that had never previously been contemplated. The terrorist network's ultimate goal was now clear. They intended to force the royal family into complete withdrawal from public life, creating a vacuum that would destabilize British society and provide opportunities for their broader political objectives. Every security measure implemented in response to their threats served their strategic purposes by creating distance between the monarchy and the people. Marcus presented his team's assessment of the current threat level and the measures that would be necessary to maintain effective protection while allowing continued public engagement. The recommendations were sobering. Any public appearance would require security measures so extensive that they would fundamentally alter the nature of royal interaction with citizens. The psychological impact on Princess Catherine was evident as she processed the implications of the intelligence reports. The realization that her presence at any public event would create significant danger for attendees was weighing heavily on her conscience and affecting her ability to maintain the positive outlook that had always characterized her approach to public service. Emma Clark briefed the royal couple on specific threats that had been identified for each of their upcoming engagements. The level of detail possessed by the terrorist network about their schedules and movements was deeply disturbing and suggested that the security breaches extended far beyond what had been initially discovered. The technical analysis team had made additional discoveries that painted an even more troubling picture of the conspiracy's capabilities. The terrorists possessed detailed architectural plans of multiple royal residences, including information about security systems and emergency procedures that should have been accessible only to the most trusted personnel. James Rodriguez reported on countermeasures being implemented to address the identified vulnerabilities, but the scope of the required changes would take weeks to complete. In the meantime, the royal family would be living with security risks that were unprecedented in the modern era of royal protection. The conversation turned to the fundamental question of whether public engagement could continue under these circumstances. Princess Catherine argued passionately that withdrawing from public life would hand the terrorists a complete victory and abandon the people who depended on royal support during their most difficult moments. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of having to balance his professional obligation to provide absolute security with his understanding of the broader implications of different security decisions. The choice was not simply between safety and danger, but between different types of risks that carried different consequences for the institution of the monarchy. The intelligence reports revealed that the terrorist network had been monitoring not only official royal engagements, but also private family activities. Photographs had been taken of the royal children during school activities, and detailed surveillance had been conducted of their security arrangements and daily routines. Prince William's reaction to this information was immediate and intense. The threat to his children transformed the situation from a professional challenge into a deeply personal crisis that required consideration of options that no parent should ever have to contemplate. The meeting continued for several hours as various scenarios were discussed and evaluated. Each option carried significant risks and consequences, and the decisions that emerged would affect not only the immediate safety of the royal family, but the future of the monarchy's relationship with the British people. Marcus left Kensington Palace with a heavy heart, understanding that the events of the past day had fundamentally altered the landscape of royal protection in ways that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. The successful defense at the community center had prevented one tragedy, but it had also revealed the existence of threats that challenged the very foundations of how the royal family could safely engage with the public. The investigation continued around the clock as additional cells were identified and pursued, but the scope of the conspiracy suggested that complete elimination of the threat would require months of dedicated effort by multiple agencies. In the meantime, the royal family would have to live with security restrictions that would fundamentally change their ability to fulfill their traditional roles. As evening approached, Marcus reviewed the enhanced security protocols that would be implemented immediately to address the most urgent threats while longer-term solutions were developed. The balance between security and public accessibility that had defined royal protection for decades would have to be completely reconsidered in light of the new reality they faced. The weight of responsibility for protecting the royal family had never felt heavier, as Marcus prepared for another sleepless night of monitoring threats and coordinating responses. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new dangers, but tonight, his focus remained on ensuring that Princess Catherine and her family remained safe while the investigation continued its vital work of dismantling the conspiracy that threatened everything they represented. 6 months after the community center attack, Marcus Thompson stood in the same spot where he had fired the shots that saved Princess Catherine's life, now transformed into a memorial garden honoring the victims of terrorism while celebrating the resilience of the human spirit. The investigation had concluded with the arrest of 47 conspirators across 12 countries, dismantling one of the most sophisticated terrorist networks ever to target the British royal family. The final debriefing session had taken place just that morning, bringing together all the agencies and individuals who had participated in what was now being called Operation Defender. The scope of the conspiracy had ultimately proved even more extensive than initially feared, involving state-sponsored terrorism, international criminal networks, and domestic extremist groups, working together toward the common goal of destabilizing British institutions. Princess Catherine had insisted on attending the memorial service despite ongoing security concerns, her presence serving as a powerful symbol of defiance against those who had sought to silence her voice and end her service to the public. The transformation of the community center into a place of remembrance and hope had been her personal project, reflecting her determination to ensure that something positive emerged from the trauma of that terrible day. Marcus watched as Catherine moved through the crowd of community members, many of whom had been present during the attack, and now gathered to commemorate both the lives lost and the courage displayed by ordinary citizens who had helped protect each other during the chaos. Her genuine warmth and concern for their welfare remained unchanged, though Marcus could see the subtle signs of the lasting impact the events had left on her spirit. Sarah Mitchell, recently promoted to Deputy Chief of Royal Protection, briefed Marcus on the enhanced security measures that had been permanently implemented following the comprehensive review of protection protocols. The changes were extensive but designed to be as unobtrusive as possible, maintaining the accessibility that had always characterized royal family interactions with the public. The investigation had revealed that the terrorist network had been planning attacks for nearly 2 years, using the time to infiltrate support organizations, recruit sympathizers within government agencies, and gather intelligence about security procedures and royal family activities. The patience and sophistication of their operation had initially made it nearly invisible to standard counterterrorism monitoring. Emma Clark, now serving as Princess Catherine's primary protection coordinator, reported on the psychological support programs that had been established for all personnel involved in the incident. The trauma of that day had affected everyone differently, and ongoing counseling was helping team members process their experiences while maintaining their effectiveness as protection officers. The technology recovered from the terrorist network had led to significant advances in counter-terrorism capabilities, with new detection systems being implemented to identify similar threats before they could advance to operational stages. The encryption methods and communication protocols used by the conspirators were now being studied to develop countermeasures against future attacks. James Rodriguez had been instrumental in developing these new capabilities, his technical expertise proving invaluable in understanding and countering the sophisticated methods employed by modern terrorist organizations. The lessons learned from Operation Defender were being shared with allies around the world to enhance global security cooperation. Marcus reflected on the personal cost of that day's events as he observed the memorial ceremony. 3 civilians had died during the evacuation, victims of the panic that had swept through the community center when gunfire erupted. Their families were present today, their grief a sobering reminder that even successful protection operations carried profound human costs. The official investigation had completely vindicated the actions of Marcus and his team, finding that their response had prevented what could have been a massacre involving dozens of casualties. The decision to engage the armed suspects had been analyzed from every angle and deemed not only appropriate, but essential to preventing a far greater tragedy. Princess Catherine approached Marcus during the reception following the memorial service, her expression conveying gratitude that went beyond words. "I think about that day often," she said quietly. "Not just about what happened, but about what didn't happen because of you and your team. Those children who were there, the families who went home safely, they owe their lives to your courage." Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with Royal Protection Service, but also a deep satisfaction in knowing that their training and dedication had made the difference between life and death for innocent people. "Your Royal Highness," he replied, "we were just doing our jobs. What matters is that you're here today, continuing to serve the people who need you most." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the memorial wall, where a young boy was asking his mother about the names engraved in the stone. Princess Catherine immediately moved to speak with the family, kneeling down to the child's level and explaining in simple terms about courage, sacrifice, and the importance of remembering those who had been lost. Marcus observed this interaction with professional interest and personal admiration, noting how Catherine's natural ability to connect with people remained unchanged despite the trauma she had experienced. Her commitment to her public role had, if anything, been strengthened by the events of that day, though it now carried an awareness of vulnerability that had not existed before. The enhanced security protocols implemented in the aftermath of the attack had required significant adjustments by both the protection teams and the royal family members themselves. Public engagements now involved more extensive advanced planning, larger security footprints, and more sophisticated threat assessment procedures that affected every aspect of royal activities. Despite these challenges, Princess Catherine had refused to reduce her public commitments, arguing that doing so would hand a victory to those who had sought to intimidate her into withdrawal from public service. Her schedule remained full of charitable work, official engagements, and community support activities that brought her into contact with thousands of people each month. Sarah Mitchell briefed Marcus on intelligence, indicating that remnants of the terrorist network were still active in several countries, though their capabilities had been significantly degraded by the extensive arrests and prosecutions that had followed the investigation. Ongoing vigilance would be necessary to prevent any attempts at retaliation or continuation of their activities. The trial of the main conspirators had concluded just 3 weeks earlier, with sentences ranging from life imprisonment to lengthy terms that would ensure they remained incarcerated well into their elderly years. The evidence presented during the proceedings had provided the public with a comprehensive understanding of the threat that had been posed and the measures that had been necessary to counter it. Marcus had testified extensively during the trial, his detailed account of the community center attack serving as the centerpiece of the prosecution's case against the primary defendants. The experience of reliving those moments in court had been difficult, but necessary for ensuring that justice was served and that the full scope of the conspiracy was documented for history. The international cooperation that had emerged from the investigation had led to permanent improvements in intelligence sharing and counterterrorism coordination between allied nations. The methods employed by the terrorist network had required responses that transcended national boundaries and traditional agency jurisdictions. Emma Clark reported on the ongoing assessment of insider threats within government agencies and support organizations that had access to royal family information. The discovery that the terrorist network had recruited sympathizers within the system had led to comprehensive security clearance reviews and enhanced monitoring procedures. As the memorial service concluded and the crowds began to disperse, Marcus took a final look around the community center that had been transformed from a place of terror into a symbol of resilience and remembrance. The events of that day would remain with him for the rest of his career, a defining moment that had tested every aspect of his training and commitment. Princess Catherine made her way back to the waiting convoy, pausing to thank each member of her security team personally for their continued dedication and professionalism. The relationships formed during times of crisis had created bonds that went beyond the normal professional interactions between protectors and their charges. The drive back to Kensington Palace proceeded without incident, but Marcus remained vigilant as always, understanding that the price of security was eternal vigilance and that the threats they faced continued to evolve in response to changing political and social conditions around the world. That evening, as Marcus completed his final security briefing of the day, he reflected on the journey from that moment of split-second decision in the community center to this point of relative stability and enhanced preparedness. The successful resolution of the crisis had reinforced his faith in the training and procedures that governed royal protection, while also highlighting areas where continued improvement was necessary. Princess Catherine had resumed her full schedule of public engagements, her presence at events serving as a powerful symbol of the monarchy's resilience and commitment to public service, despite the threats that existed in an increasingly dangerous world. The courage she displayed in continuing her work was, in its own way, as remarkable as any displayed by her protection teams. The lessons learned from Operation Defender were now being incorporated into training programs for protection officers around the world, ensuring that the knowledge gained from that terrible day would contribute to the safety of other public figures and the citizens they served. The ultimate victory over terrorism lay not in the elimination of individual threats, but in the refusal to be deterred from the work of building a better society. As Marcus locked his office and prepared to head home to his own family, he carried with him the satisfaction of knowing that Princess Catherine was safe. The terrorist network had been dismantled, and the institutions they had sought to destroy remained strong and resilient. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new responsibilities, but tonight, the forces of peace and justice had prevailed over those who sought to spread fear and destruction. The memorial garden would remain as a permanent reminder of the price of freedom and the courage required to defend it, while Princess Catherine would continue her work of bringing hope and support to communities across the nation. In the end, that was the true victory. Not just the prevention of tragedy, but the continuation of service that made such sacrifices meaningful and worthwhile.